When a famous left-wing activist dies, it's not normal for people to pile on to what they believed, because we already knew what they believed. We had already spent our time, when they were alive, critiquing them, and so we dealt with what they were saying while they were here. But the left doesn't do that. The left tries to pretend that people basically don't exist. And then when they die, they have to do something that's really macabre, which is to essentially spend their time in active campaign mode against the now dead man, as if he had done something to offend them by dying. Sorry, and when I say dying, I mean being horrifically murdered in front of his family. You'll notice that, like, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, you know, I didn't see a single person being like, right, let me spend my time trying to undermine her philosophy and tell you why she was a really bad person. Because she's, I mean, A, they did that during her life, and B, she's not here anymore. Now is not the time, actually. The people mourning her should probably be left to mourn, but not Lewis. Lewis is like, Boris Johnson says something nice about Charlie Kirk. Boris, relatively tepid, sort of, you know, Charlie Kirk, relatively centrist Republican guy, and Lewis is like, yeah, his murder's appalling, but, and that's the important bit, the but. I need to get past the but, because, I mean, I imagine Lewis Goodall said absolutely nothing about Charlie Kirk when he was alive, and it's only now he's been murdered, he's like, yep, no, you know, I've got to ruin the man's reputation and tell everyone how bad a person he is. And it's so, that's a remarkable thing to do. And then when Trump's like, well, radical left-wing groups are responsible for worsening political violence, yeah, that seems to be the case. I mean, it seems that he was murdered by some sort of Discord transgender group, and that he was radicalized on Discord and on, like, you know, various sort of chats into radical left-wing ideology. His family members said, yeah, he was like the one leftist in the family, and he was mental. I don't think he was actually radicalized in his university. It seems that it's just his social activity that radicalized him. And so Lewis is worried. Trump's words will fuel fears. He intends to use Kirk's murder as an excuse to crack down on further dissent, as in to crack down on the radical left. I mean, Trump has literally stipulated radical left-wing groups who are terrorist groups in themselves, we can call them Antifa if you like, or some variation thereof, have just murdered one of his friends and most ardent supporters in cold blood, in midday, pure broad daylight, in front of thousands of people, on camera. One of the most horrific murders and I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet, one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And Lewis is like, you can't go after radical left terrorist groups. It's like, what, do you think that's going to include you, Lewis? I thought you were like a moderate centrist liberal, Lewis. Does that then mean that you have to leap to the defense of the left-wing terrorists? And if so, why? It's because you're not really as centrist as you give on, isn't it? But anyway, so he did this, they put out this clip. And man, we're going to watch it because it's just, you are a radical leftist, Lewis. And you're also a piece of shit, right? The man has just died. The man has just been murdered in front of his children. And you're like, yeah, you know what I need to do? Go after his views. It's like, well, why didn't you do that when he was alive? Why didn't you pay any attention to him when he was alive if you're so interested in talking about it?
So just to emphasize, again, his murder is appalling. But the idea that...
Again, his murder was appalling, but... Right, so what you're saying from all of this, his murder was appalling, but actually it was justified. His murder was appalling, but there are reasons why it might have happened. His murder was appalling, but it's kind of to be expected. That's how this comes across, Lewis. That's how this sounds. It sounds like you are making excuses for the murderer. It really sounds like that. And in fact, should we have a look at the replies? I haven't looked at the replies. I wonder if that's what people are saying. Oh, look, people are like, yeah, no, it's common sense. It's common sense. It's common sense. Deranged extremists. Imagine going on TV to justify a murder because of opinions. Don't worry, this guy's not on TV here. But you could have kept your mouth shut for at least 24 hours. Yeah. Imagine two GB News presenters downplaying the public assassination of a Green Corbynista in this way. Yeah, like when Jo Cox was murdered, did I go through her body of work and be like, this is why she's wrong, this is why she's wrong, this is why she deserves it? No, of course. You are so violent, out of touch with people. Like, again, Lewis, this was the wrong fucking time, mate, right? I don't know why you've decided that upon the man's brutal murder is the time to try and make everyone think he's a bad person, but that's really not acceptable, is it? It's just really unacceptable. And especially the framing. Oh yeah, I deplore his murder, but I can see why it happened, but kind of deserved it. Because, let me explain to you why he was a bad person, and actually why we really shouldn't be mourning the fact that he was just murdered in front of his children. This is insufferable. Go on, Lewis.
So just to emphasise, again, his murder is appalling, but the idea that he was murdered for espousing some sort of common sense, mainstream set of views that others dared not say is nonsense, right?
Right. So what you're saying is he was murdered for having views that are outside of the mainstream. Now, whether you agree with that or not, you are at least agreeing that he was murdered because of his views, and now you're going to try and attack the views to kind of make it seem like this is actually not an unusual thing, not something that shouldn't happen, actually. It's quite insane, Lewis. It's genuinely insane that you're doing this.
I mean, you cannot say, there is no polling. If any of it exists out there, please show it to me. But there is no polling which would show majority views, even in the United States, for saying that being gay is an error and comparing it to drug addiction, for not believing in abortion in almost any circumstances, for spreading falsehoods about voter fraud, COVID, other conspiracy theories, opposing birth control, having very traditional views on the role of women, and claiming in one tweet that the Great Replacement theory was actively UK government policy, right? And given all of that, you would think that kind of beatifying Charlie Kirk might be confined purely to the kind of outer fringes of the MAGA world, but it hasn't been. And I think one of the most striking things about the last 24 hours has been a reminder of the extent to which there is now a common sort of radical right Anglosphere, US, UK shared conversation, which goes...
Okay, let's start from the beginning. These are all perfectly normal things for people to think. It's just that they don't tend to bring these up in public because of people like you, frankly. People like you who will shout them down and tell them they're bad people for thinking them. And you can say, well, these are somehow radical right-wing views, but actually I'm not sure that they are. Because, these views ultimately put Donald Trump in the White House. It doesn't have to be a majority of people that believe it to make it a normal view. Even if only something like 40% of Americans believe it, 40% of Americans don't agree with it, and then 20% say they don't know, there's still a really widely held view that's a huge swathe of the public, more than enough to win a presidential election, right? So you can sit there and complain that the public doesn't share them. It's yes, they do. In many cases, they absolutely do. And I can't help but notice that you are speaking from a position of decades and decades of propaganda against the public on the behalf of the liberal establishment about what they wanted to bring about. And so it's everyone agrees with gay marriage and women in the workplace and all these other things like COVID and whatnot. And it's you've had a non-stop propaganda machine trying to persuade the public that this is the case. And even now, a lot of people don't agree with these things, right? A lot of people are against these things. So you can act as if it's just a done deal, but clearly it's not. And if people can be persuaded one way, well, maybe they can be persuaded the other way as well. So maybe these views are not as immutable and eternal as you think, because, if we go back 100 years and do some polling, what do you think the results would be? So traditional perspectives were espoused by someone like Charlie Kirk, and people who are conservatives agree with those perspectives, and actually there is something to them, even if it's not the whole story. But you would have it that there's nothing to them because you don't like Charlie Kirk, and you've decided to take the moment of his death in order to attack him. It's genuinely insane. It's really inhuman of you, actually, Lewis. Completely inappropriate. Completely inappropriate. And as you can see from your replies, I'm not sure you're on the right on this one.
Up to and includes our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson tweeting, "The murder of Charlie Kirk is a tragedy and a sign of the utter desperation and cowardice of those who could not defeat him in argument. Kirk had been killed not for espousing extremist views, because he didn't. He's been killed for saying things that used to be simple common sense. Used to be simple common sense. Until the liberal mouth machine
decided it could just non-stop crank it out on the airwaves and browbeat everyone into believing, or at least saying that they believe, what the liberals believe. These things all used to be completely common sense.
Kill because he had the courage to stand up publicly for reasonable opinions held by millions and millions.
I think that's a real window into Boris Johnson's mind, actually, just as you set that out, because the first part of it makes total sense. If you are a fan of free speech, you say we allow people, and many on both sides, I think, of the political spectrum are, we allow people to believe whatever they want and they can say whatever they want.
And that means if you say something that is illiberal, as in goes against established liberal doctrine and dogma, then when you get shot by some extremist liberal, a communist, who agrees with everything that Mateless and Goodall here are saying, they're completely in favour of, gay marriage and all that, blah, 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 right? When one of their outriders, the most fringe lunatics, goes and shoots you, the liberals will be like, well, terrible. But he was a bad person and kind of had it fucking coming because he didn't believe in the things that I believe, and therefore that's fine. Really interesting how your commitment to free speech is literally just as long as you agree with me.
And Charlie Kirk, to give him his due, he wasn't an anonymous keyboard warrior. He didn't just do it online.
He went out there.
He went out there. He took his argument. He tried to sell his argument.
And he was unafraid of arguing.
He was unafraid of arguing, and he was happy to debate with people face to face, whether it was Democrats, whether it was Republicans, whoever, he would sit down and have those debates.
But he did spread lies.
But to then elide that.
Look at that. Even in the middle of trying to, okay, what did he do right? Well, he did democracy correctly. This is what Ezra Klein's take was, and mine, in fact. This is what democracy is meant to be. It's meant to be people talking in public about issues so everyone else can decide for themselves, right? That's what it is meant to be. And Charlie was doing this all the time. And in fact, he was supremely persuasive, which is why he had so many followers. And couldn't help but Lewis, but he was spreading lies. He was spreading lies. Well, hang on a second, Lewis. I think you spread lies. I think you spread lies all the time. I think you and Emily Maitlis, the news agent Charlie, you spread lies non-stop. So your characterization of him spreading lies, I actually think is not necessarily him consciously trying to lie. What I think it is different interpretations of the same subject, because I think you have interpretations that are extremely generous towards the liberal establishment, the ideological agenda that you're pursuing, and therefore anything that's contradicting that and anything that might not be, say, officially rubber stamped by the institutions, you consider to just be flat false, even though when on the treadmill of this, as we went through COVID, it's like, yeah, that's not true. Okay, yeah, it's true. That's not true. Yeah, okay, it's true. That's not true. Okay, yeah, that's true too. That's not true. Oh, well, that one turned out to be true also, right? We go through this kind of treadmill position of the institutions denying it, you accepting the denial categorically, and then it turning out to actually have been true later on down the line. It's just it takes longer to prove that something is true than to deny that it's true. And as soon as the authority, the charisma of the office denies it, you go, well, there we go. That's the experts have said. That's enough work for me because I'm a fucking journalist.
Into an idea that he just spoke for the common man, spoke the truth, spoke good sense.
Well, you don't. No one thinks you speak for the common man, right?
When he actually referred to the Great Replacement theory, as you said, that is suggesting that undocumented immigrants were coming to the US to replace white Americans, or as you say...
Yeah, that's literally the plan. This has been out in... This is literally the plan, and it has been for a long time. And normally it's the justification you give. Why do we need immigration? Well, we need someone to prop up the NHS. We need someone to pay for the pensions. We need someone to keep the economy going. Because without migrants... not in native people to these countries haven't had enough children, and therefore these things will decline and eventually fall in disrepair and fail. That's literally the fucking argument. Is yes, we need you here to replace people because there are not enough children here, because our entire benefit system is a giant pyramid scheme. That is entirely the argument. And yet you're like, well, you said replacement. Yeah, but so do you. So do you. This is exactly what they believe, and it's not a secret. So don't give me this nonsense.
The spreading of medical misinformation during COVID
Oh, really? I'm not even going to we're not even getting into that argument. We're not going to get into that
You
argument.
know, he was even banned from Twitter. When he talked about the Civil Rights Act being a mistake in the 1960s, he called it permanent bureaucracy.
Yeah. And it is. The Civil Rights Act is bad law, according to US Constitution. Right? To force people to live together is an infringement on freedom of association. It's just you as liberals really agree with it. And since the 60s and 70s, this era was the quintessentially liberal era coming forth in American culture and politics. Well, yes. And it's the same with abortion. It's the same with gay marriage. Like, these things are not necessarily in line with the Constitution, actually. And they are what they are, is liberal canards that they're desperate to make. And, like, for the example, the abortion one was torturous. Like, the idea that you could... I can't remember the exact argument now off the top of my head. I should have prepared in advance. I should have guessed that she was going to bring this up. But I remember reading it like a year and a half ago. Whenever they repealed Roe v. Wade. And I was like, this doesn't make sense at all. You've definitely innovated in this regard. And the Civil Rights Act is the same. It's not in line with freedom of association, which actually is guaranteed by the Constitution. And so it does create a permanent bureaucracy, an expanded bureaucracy, to make sure that there is essentially an enforced diversity and plurality in communities. Like, this is not good legislation. This shouldn't have been imposed on people. Obviously, there shouldn't be physical, legal segregation, but that doesn't mean busing kids from one school to another to force them to to work and live and go to school in communities that they've got no experience of. That's not what that means. And yet that's what the Civil Rights Act does.
You know, the idea that they got it wrong because it actually promoted diversity and inclusion.
Yes, I think that they got it wrong because it actively promoted diversity and inclusion and not freedom. I think they got it wrong. I'm not a liberal. Charlie Kirk wasn't a liberal. You are a fucking liberal. You are a liberal extremist. And so you have decided Charlie Kirk didn't agree with these liberal things, therefore I'm going to call him a bad person for however long on my podcast. I'm going to repeatedly do it. Why? Because he's just died. I didn't bring him up ever before, but now he's dead. I'm going to tell you why he's a bad person. Honestly, I'm just absolutely sick of these people. But anyway, they went on for ages, right? Again, you can see here Lewis going on and on and on, trying to call Charlie Kirk a bad person. And he continues on. So you can, if you're like Academic Agent and you're not happy with this at all, because the man is a raving extremist lunatic and a danger to the social fabric of the country, which I think that he is, you can file a complaint with Ofcom. You don't have to stand for this, actually. You can contact Ofcom, go on the website, fill in their form, explain what your grievance is, and register your complaint. That's what Ofcom is for. We can do this. It's completely legitimate, and that's, again, the purpose. If you're not happy with Emily Maitlis and Lewis Goodall saying, well, it's terrible he's dead, but here's the reason why it's justifiable that he has been shot, then you can register a complaint. You're completely within your rights to do that, and feel free. That's absolutely what it's for, and we don't have to take this, right? It should be at least understood that there should be some decorum. Right? When someone is murdered and millions of people are outraged, you don't actually sit there spending your time trying to damn their memory. Like, that's a terrible, terrible thing to do. It's really awful. And honestly, it's just genuinely disgusting.